Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kick this off. Today, we're going to be talking about designing better presentations. In the chat, I'm going to put a link right now to our slide deck for today. So if you want, I've got a lot of resources in there for you and links and things that you can access today, but also that you can go back and access next week or 3 months from now when you're ready to use this at the beginning of the next school year. So you might want to grab a copy of the slide deck just by going to that link. You'll notice it's also here on the screen right now. And I'm going to be sharing my slides, so you'll be able to see everything on our screen, but that part's not interactive. So you may want to have this open in a second tab so that you've got the interactive components there. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our presentation today. We're talking about designing better presentations. So here's the issue. A lot of us start with presentations that look a whole lot like this. Just plain text. We're using the default everything. People in this kind of a slide deck are going to be very likely to tune out and stop paying attention to this. It's bland, it's colorless, nothing about this sparks joy. And let's be honest, if you had to watch an hour of this right now, most of you probably would be hoping that it's over. So our goal, our objective is to avoid this style of presentation and this style of slide decks as much as possible. So this is the way a lot of people start. I've seen this in some classrooms that I've been in. We've probably all seen this from time to time, and this is what we're trying to avoid and why hopefully I think you came today. We've also probably all seen something that looks a little bit like this at times, where there's like this whole narrative of text that just gets pasted into the slide. It's overwhelming. There's too much information for you here to even process this. And obviously, in this situation, if I'm talking and explaining something, you have a choice to make as an audience member. You can either read what I've put on the slide, or you can listen to me, but there's no way that you'd be able to do both of those things at the same time. So those are the key components for this. Is you were definitely overwhelming everybody with that. Hey, it looks like I need to get some different access to the slide deck. Give me 1 second, and I will get that going for everybody. Sorry about that. Okay, I just updated the permissions. Go ahead and refresh. See if you guys can all grab access to that now. You should be able to load it without issue. Somebody just give me like a thumb up on the screen or let me know in the chat. Kim's got it. Okay, I think we're good to go. So 2 examples so far of pretty bad presentation design and things that we're trying to avoid. We also probably have all seen things that look a little bit like this too, where now we've got an overload, but it's not the text on the screen. It's just too much visual information. Clearly, we're trying to communicate something about tacos, but we've done it by finding like 4 different images of tacos. Some are overlapping others in there. You'll also notice if you look in the bottom right-hand corner that we've got a font that's highlighted and it's in a box of color. The whole thing is a bit of a mess. And we're on overload here. So we want to avoid this. If the idea is to talk about tacos, probably one of these images would work. And if we're going to use all 4, we certainly have to crop and organize them in a little bit more of a palatable and aesthetically pleasing fashion. Some of the other common mistakes that I see a whole lot are pictures on top of pictures. This is never a good look, where you've got like a big picture in the background and then you've put other images on top of it. And you'll notice a couple of other things over here that are huge pet peeves of mine and that your students definitely notice. Everybody can see the pixelated fox. I found this image, but it just doesn't look good. It's very small. I stretched it up and it's not recoverable. I've got to go find a different, better image to use than that one. And then lastly, another bugaboo is this camel up at the top that is definitely not copyright compliant. This was stolen from iStock Photo. It's got the watermark right on top of it. So you can tell right there it's not an authorized photo that I have permission to use. And in addition to that, we've got the big white background, like the big square that this camel is in. These are big no-nos and things that we kind of want to walk away from. So we've kind of started with an overview of some of the really bad things that we do, and hopefully we'll be able to move in a better direction with all this today. I also want to show everybody one other thing that gets us into trouble, and that's this: the person that goes font crazy and color crazy and starts to use like 8 different fonts on a slide because they can't pick between all of their favorites, and they want to make it bright and stand out to students and really be dynamic. And so we've got a lot of colors going on here. We've got way too many fonts. I mean, the general rule of thumb is you want 2, maybe 3 fonts in an entire slide deck, certainly not this many on a slide. And these colors are just competing, they're clashing. There's no focus to this at all. This would be really hard for me to read as a student or as an audience member. And man, that one down at the bottom, that like magenta on top of green with the red outline, like it's not even readable for me. It's not even legible. So these are the things that we're trying to avoid today. Hopefully, we've been able to start with a little bit of humor and you've seen the extreme of the really bad things to do. And now we can take this and move this in a more positive direction for our presentations and our slide decks. So I want to start off with a little bit of research for us today. This isn't just, hey, we should design slides that look good because it makes people feel happy. But there's a lot of research that says people will learn more effectively from multimedia messages when they're stripped of extraneous things that are not needed. If we put too much information, too many stimuli up on a screen, it's really hard to be able to glean the main information from that. And the reason is we're overtaxing the audience's cognitive resources. So if you go into any sort of the cognitive sciences and take a look at this, there's a very set amount of information that we can absorb in one visual medium at a time, and we can utilize some of those things in our design. Now, the one problem with this is left its own devices. This is kind of a call for like that very first slide that we put up, which was just plain white background, simple fonts, a dearth of text. And we know that's not best either. And so if you take a look at some of the other research that's out there, it says at the same time that we want to avoid cognitive overload, we've got to remember that slide decks and presentations by definition are a visual medium. So slides need to have enough visual interest to draw the audience in. Otherwise, they just kind of become wallpaper. They become this background noise and you stop engaging with it at all. So we're really looking for the sweet spot, something that is visually stimulating and interesting, but isn't going to overload and overwhelm the audience so that they're engaged by it and are curious about what's coming next. How do we maximize engagement? And there's a lot that we can do in our slide presentations to make that happen. So what do we do? Do we all need to become professional graphic designers to make sure that we're making engaging presentations? Do we have to have like a degree in art and font and style and white space and all? No, we don't. There are a lot of things that we can do with just a couple of basics and fundamentals. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to answer in the hour that we're going to spend together today. Are what are some of the techniques and principles that I can apply to my next presentation or my next slide deck? And then also, what are some of the tools that are out there to maybe help me and maybe assist me with everything? All right, let me pause here for a second before we start to get into the good stuff. Are there any questions that have come up so far or any comments that anybody has to add? All right, so I promised techniques, I promised some principles, I promised resources. Let's dive into some of those things. Do we need to be a graphic designer? No. We're going to take a look at some strategies and some resources together to make your next slide deck better than all the ones that you've made before. So here's the first thing I'm going to recommend. And if you remember nothing else from me today, this would be the one big takeaway that hopefully everybody can adopt and bring forward. Because I think this is really going to give you like 90% of the wow in all of your next presentations that you do, is just go out there and find a great theme. Now, I use Google Slides for a lot of things. And I got to be honest, the themes that are built into Google Slides are pretty terrible. And it doesn't take very many presentations before you've tried them all and you're kind of unsatisfied with all of them. So I have some places that you can go outside of just the plain Google universe to get some great themes and templates that you can use. And if you're a user of PowerPoint, all of this works in PowerPoint as well. I will say PowerPoint, I think, has better default themes in PowerPoint. But I now am using Google Slides way more. So I was definitely looking for a solution that would work in Google Slides. And the couple things I'm going to give you will work for either one of those, whether you're a PowerPoint person primarily or you're a Google Slide person. So let's start with my 3 favorite resources for themes and templates. They're all up here on the slide deck right now. And if you've got a copy of the slide deck in your own browser tab, you'll be able to click on these things. Let me drop the link to that slide deck one more time right over here. These are the 3 places that I head whenever I need a new slide deck. I go to either, and sometimes I'll go to all 3 looking for like, okay, what do I want to use today? Slides Mania, Slides Carnival, and Slides Go are all awesome resources. Just a real quick poll of those that are on the call right now. How many are all 3 of these brand new to you right now? Just raise your hand on camera. And how many have heard of at least one of these before? Okay, great. So this is awesome. This is perhaps the best thing that I've got for you today. And it's right over here at the front. So Slides Mania, Slides Carnival, Slides Go. In fact, if you take a look at the screen in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the Slides Mania URL is pasted right over there on the slide. That's because this slide deck came from Slides Mania. I did not make this thing from scratch. I used their awesome theme and template, and then I kind of took it from there and customized it and ran with it. So I'm going to demo one of these for you right now. You can also play along at home if you want to experiment. Feel free to do that right now, or you can play around later. It's totally up to you if you just want to watch me do it right now. But all three of these websites are going to work in a very similar way. So on Slides Mania, I'm going to go ahead and click Slides Mania. It's going to take me out to this website. Free creative PowerPoint templates and Google Slide themes, much more than just presentations. And what you could do is you could start to scroll down and take a look at some of the recent templates that have been added. So, hey, if you're looking for like an end of the year scrapbook that you need to put together for your students or your classes, and you want to add in some pictures of things you did this year, maybe you want to use that as kind of a jumping off point. And lo and behold, like, oh, look, there's the slide deck that I'm using for this presentation. That's right over there right now. Or we've got a spin the wheel slide deck, or just a simple presentation slide deck. If I click this button, I can go see a whole bunch more. And they've got tons in here, and you can scroll back in time and check out all the awesome ones they have. Okay, let's say you really like this slide deck right over here, the AJAC one that I'm looking at right now. If you click on that, it will allow you to go in and kind of preview this. And here's what I like the most. It gives you like a preview of what some of their different layouts look like here. So you can see there's a harmonious color scheme, but not all the slides are the exact same color. And you can kind of get an idea of the different layouts that exist for you. I like to scroll down a little bit because down here they have a little embedded Google slide deck that's a preview for you. And here I can just click these arrows and I can see like what do the different slides look like. So here's slide number 1, that would be like your title slide. Slide 2, slide 3, slide 4. So I can kind of get a feel for this and go, ooh, I really like this thing. This is good. This is what I want to use for my slide deck. If this is what you want to use, then you've got 2 yellow buttons below. One is to download this as a PowerPoint. The other is to open this up in Google Slides. And I'm a Google Slides person, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. You're just going to click Open in Google Slides, and it will open it up in a new tab that allows you, again, to go through and preview the whole thing if you want. And if you decide, hey, I'm ready to use this thing, I want to add this to my Google Drive and start to customize it, all you're going to do is head to the upper right-hand corner and use that Use Template button. And when you click Use Template, it's going to make a copy of the slide deck and put it into your Google Drive. So here it is right now. You'll see for me, it says Saved to Drive up here at the top. And then the title right now is AJAC Slides Mania. So I can move this thing to like my period 2 folder or my US history folder or whatever I want. And then I can go in and I can just start to edit the text, and I can edit all of these slides. I can even do things like delete that. I don't need a table of contents. Or you know what? I need to add a slide right after this title slide. Let me go up here to the upper left-hand corner, click this little drop-down arrow, and then I've got all these different themes to pick from. So I want to add like a section title next. So I click that and boom, there's my section title. So instantly upgraded, way better themes than what are built into Google Slides. You just kind of have to pick your theme first from one of these 3 websites, import it in here, and then start building your slides from this theme and customize it to be exactly what you're looking for. So that process I just showed you works the same in Slides Mania, Slides Carnival, and Slides Go. I first started out with Slides Carnival, and I was using that exclusively. They've got a great graphic designer that works for them, but they weren't producing new themes as fast as some of the others. So I've recently kind of switched over, and I use Slides Mania as kind of my primary tool now. And then I've also used some stuff from Slides Go that's really good. All right, let me pause. What questions have come up about Slides Mania, Slides Carnival, or Slides Go? Okay, again, this is the number one thing that you could take from today is I'm just going to start to use some of these. And you'll notice you've got now, it's basically like a graphic designer works for you. They're creating beautiful themes. You just pick the one that you like, and then you customize it, and it looks like you're amazing at making slide decks, and you do graphic design work in your free time. And that, of course, is not the case. You're just using somebody else's stuff. The other thing is all of those are free as long as you give credit back to the author. So like the Slides Mania one has a little slide down at the end that they ask you to keep in your slide deck that just says, these were created by Slidesmania. And so I do that, and I never remove the little slidesmania.com. And then I'm using things in a copyright compliant way. I've got permission to use it and to remix it for my own purposes. All right, so that was step one. Get yourself an awesome theme and go to one of the places that build themes. They do this on purpose and give you some great themes as kind of a jumping off point. So after you've done that, like I said, you've done 90% of the awesome stuff on your slide deck, but you may find that the theme isn't exactly what you want. You might find that you want to start to customize a little bit. Maybe the color scheme needs a little bit of work and attention, or maybe you like it, but you've got a different idea for the fonts that you want to go with for the style that you're working with. It's a really cool theme. It's maybe a little bit too corporate feeling. You'd like to make it feel a little bit more scholastic, and you want to use some different fonts. So the next thing I recommend is step 2. If you want to build a better presentation, work on dialing in your fonts. So I would recommend using the fonts that come with your theme. You can never go wrong doing that. Or if you want to mix it up and customize your look a little bit, you can definitely do that. But my big recommendation is that you use a limited number of fonts and you try to pick some complementary fonts. In general, 2 fonts are good for a presentation. One font for like all the titles and the main like grab your attention stuff, and then a different font for the body. They could even be the same font if you want. If you want to incorporate a third font, that's fine. I would not recommend 4 or 5 different fonts in a presentation. And you definitely want to make sure that your fonts feel compatible and congruent, as opposed to that one slide that we looked at with a whole bunch of fonts that were competing and didn't look like they were really supporting each other. So where can you go for some font resources? The first place that I recommend is Google Fonts. And Google has a whole website of free fonts that are available for you to use. It's located at fonts.google.com. And this is a great place to go and discover some new fonts. So on this page, when I go right over here, you'll notice that we've got a couple of fonts. These are all already built into Google Slides. So you can kind of check out, like, what does Roboto look like? What does it look like in practice with some sample text in here? Or if you want to go up here, you can kind of sort through this thing. So I've got some categories. Let's remove all of them except for just the display fonts. Or maybe we just want handwriting fonts right now. So I'm going to turn handwriting on, turn display off. What language do we want these to be in? What do we want the font properties to be? Styles, thickness. You've got lots of different options. So if I wanted something to look like handwriting, I now have a whole bunch of preview versions in handwriting. And if I like Indie Flower a whole lot, if I go, oh man, that's a beautiful font, let's go with Indie Flower. I can click on this. I can change my preview text over here. Caleb Rothy is awesome. Okay, so now I can kind of see what that looks like. I can do some type tester with different font sizes. I can see all the different glyphs. Like, it just really allows you to drill down into your font and kind of discover some new ones. So then you can always go back to your slide deck that you had open. Let's go to this Ajax one that we were looking at a second ago. And if you decide that you want your main primary presentation font, here goes your presentation title, to instead be Indie Flower, you can just kind of scroll through this and see if you see Indie Flower in there. And if you do, you're good to go. Now, I don't see Indie Flower in my list. So that means what I'm going to need to do is go up here to More Fonts, click that, and then in here I can do a search for that font. There's Indie Flower. So I click that, got a check mark next to it. It means it's now been added to my list. And so now my new title is in Indie Flower, and I've got just what I'm looking for. So maybe that's going to be my main title font, and I'm going to go with everything in that. Boom, I've made that change, and now I can just do that to all the other slides as well. So hello, I'm done in Indie Flower. There we go. So now I'm starting to customize the fonts. I know what you're saying. Caleb, you said make sure that your fonts pair nicely and go well together. The more you start to play around with fonts, if you become a font nerd like I am, you'll start to discover certain things are complementary and other things just kind of clash quite a bit. But you don't have to do all trial and error. You can also go to these 2 resources that I've given you, the top 50 font pairings and another article about ultimate font pairings. Those both are done by graphic designers themselves, looking through trying to find nice font combinations. So you can kind of look at those, and if you just scroll down, you're like, ooh, I like that one, number 7. It'll tell you what those 2 fonts are, and then boom, there's a great way to have nice complementary fonts that you can incorporate into your slide deck. So I know a lot of the time we don't think about that. We're building a presentation. We've got like notes for our students tomorrow, and we pull up Google Slides and it starts with the Arial font. But man, how boring is it to see that everything in that Arial font every single day, every single class, all year long? It's kind of lame. So we can do a whole lot more just by tweaking a couple of fonts. But we've also all seen the person that instead makes every slide have its own unique fonts and there's no coherence to the presentation. That isn't good either. So what we're looking for is the sweet spot in the middle. 2 or 3 fonts per slide deck, and fonts that are complementary with each other. All right, let me pause. Any questions about the fonts or the resources that I've shared there? Okay, the next thing, if you're going to make a great slide deck, will be to use harmonious color schemes to make sure that you're picking colors that are complementary with each other. And man, if you thought finding complementary fonts was tough, complementary color schemes is even harder. But I have a couple of tools that I'm going to recommend for this that I think will help you a lot. So the little subtitle down here is Color Matters. It matters a lot. Those plain white slides are incredibly boring to look at, but just starting to punch up some slides with like bright blues become very overwhelming. So how can we make sure that we've got a nice harmonious color palette that we're using? Well, the first thing we can do is just use the colors that are included as part of your theme. If I go back over here to this theme that we selected, and I go over here and highlight a little bit of text, and I go up to modify the color of the text, you'll see over here Slides Mania, that's who made this slide deck. They've already put in like their default colors for this slide deck. So you can see them up there at the top. Like here's the green that goes with this yellow, that goes with this, I don't know, what is that? Almost like a salmon color. And then we've got this teal blue color. Those are the default fonts for this slide deck. I should just use a bunch of those. But what if you decide like, I want to go in a totally different direction. I like the theme of this slide deck, but it's all like earth tones and I need this to be a little bit more like ocean themed. Where can I get a nice color scheme for that? That's what I want to show you next, is where we can find those things. So I have 3 different resources for you here, and I'm going to do a real quick preview of each one just so that you can kind of get a feel for what they do. The first thing that I want to point out is this tool over here on the left, which is called Color Pick Eyedropper. And here's the purpose of this. Has anybody ever found like a logo before? And you get that logo and you go, I want to build a whole slide based around this logo or based around this icon. I wish I knew exactly what color the blue was in this logo, or I wish I knew exactly what color the orange shade was in this logo. And you're trying to kind of like match your color scheme to a color scheme that you've already incorporated from somewhere else. A great little tool if you're trying to like match colors is this Color Pick Eyedropper. It is a Chrome extension. And you'll notice I have it installed up here for me. You'll see it's right over there on my screen. Once you get it installed, check out what this thing does. If I click my little Color Pick Eyedropper, let's see. Oh, you weren't seeing it at all. There's where it is. If I click my Color Pick Eyedropper, you'll notice what I get are these little crosshairs. And as I move these things around, they are zooming in on whatever color it is that I'm hovering over. So if I was really curious, like what color is this blue? I can just hover over this blue and you'll notice I get some things down below it. The first thing I get has a little hashtag. You can see the little like pound sign right there. And it says 1297FB. That is what we call a hex code. And it's usually 6 different characters coming after that little pound sign. So what I can do right now is I can click this thing and then it gives me right there my little hex code and I can copy that thing. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that hex code. And you'll notice down below, it also gives me my RGB values. These are the red, green, blue values. So if you have a website that wants RGB, you've got it. If you've got a website that wants the hex codes, you've got that right there. So I'm going to copy my hex code. Let's say I wanted in my new slide deck for my text to be that exact shade of blue. Well, now I can hop over here to my new slide deck, the part that says here, here goes your presentation title. I can go up and change this color. And here in Google Slides, I can pick custom colors. So I'm going to go down to this little plus right here, and it's going to go, hey, what hex value do you want this color to be? So the hex value FFFFFF is pure white. If I paste in instead my hex value that I just got from that other page, it goes to exactly that shade of blue that I had before. And I can now click OK, and boom, there is that exact same shade of blue that I pulled in from this other page. So we can do other things, like a common one that I know some people do is they try to get like what are the district's official colors from the logo and things like that. So for that, you can just go to the district website, click your little color pick tool, and now we can figure out what's this exact shade of blue that is used on the district website. We've got it right over there. Or hey, the orange in the district logo, what's that exact shade of orange? And we've got it over there. So now any website that you have open, you can find out exactly what the color is in any portion of the page. So as I zoom around, you'll see all these different colors start to pop up. We've got a teacher here. We can even figure out exactly what shade of blue her shirt is, and so we can match our colors to that. So anything you can find online, you can now match colors with. Okay, so that's great. That's the first step. I've got one color. I want to match it somewhere else. How do I do it? Color Pick Eyedropper is the tool for you. What if instead you were looking for kind of like that ocean theme that we were talking about before? Wanted a color scheme. It was going to be a fresh, brand new color scheme. Or maybe you wanted to take this, but you wanted to redo these colors in the background. How would we go about doing that? I'll get two websites for this for you. The first one is coolers.co. And when you go over here, there's a little, you have to like click, approve the cookies and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually you can get over here to this color scheme generator. So here's what I love about this. If I press the space bar, it's going to randomize all these colors. And it's going to give me 5 colors that look nice together. They're complementary with each other. So if I was building a slide deck, I could use these 5 colors and they would be harmonious and they would go well together. And this is a good jumping off point. And then I can hit that space bar again and I can cycle through a few more. Hit the space bar again, and then I go, ooh, Eminence. I like this one. I like this purple a whole lot. I want to hold on to this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click the padlock over here, and I'm going to press the space bar again, and now it will just shuffle the other 4 colors, and it will find 4 others that definitely agree with that purple that I already selected. Let's do it one more time. Boom. So now we're getting new color schemes that kind of agree with whatever that purple is. I can also do something like, remember on that color pick eyedropper, I went in to figure out what that shade of blue was right up there. Since I still have that copied, I can go in here and click on this thing and I can say, hey, what if that wasn't cadet gray? What if instead that was the exact blue that we sampled from that other screen? There's that same exact blue. In fact, it even labeled it Dodger blue down here at the bottom. And what I can do now is I can turn the padlock on that, and boom, now I can say, hey, give me color schemes that work nicely with this purple and this blue from the slide deck. So if you ever get like an icon that's got 2 colors, you could sample those 2 colors, save them in here, and then say, hey, can you give me 3 other colors that look complementary with that, 3 other colors that kind of work? And so then as you're doing this, once you start to go like, oh, I really like this piggy pink, that's going to stay. Now we're just now cycling those last 2 colors. So let's say you get 5 that you really like. There are your 5 new hex values for all of those. So coolers.co, great way to get a color scheme and be able to customize that and have that looking great. Next one I want to show you is this little tool called Adobe Color. And if you've taken an art class, you'll already be familiar with some of these things here, but you have on this a color wheel that's available here, and you can kind of like drag these around and it will constantly give you some different colors that are analogous to one another. So it's giving me 5 different shades, and no matter where I drag this thing around, it will try to keep analogous colors there as my 5 different samples. I don't always have to go analogous though. I can go monochromatic with my color scheme. I could do that triad where we've got, these are all separated in the 3 different zones of the color scheme. We can go complementary colors for this. So now we can rotate this and go, hey, if I'm going to do reds, that's got to be with greens. If I'm going to do yellows, that's going to be with blues. And all sorts of different other ones in here. So split complementary, double split complementary. So this is a really nice way to be able to like drag these things around and start to pick harmonious color schemes, and you can visualize it using the color wheel. One of the other things that I love about this is this exact extract theme part. Anybody ever found an image that you really like and you go, man, I wish I could get like a color scheme that would go with this photo or with this image or with this icon? You can now. So what I'm going to do is it gives you this little drag and drop feature. So I'm going to go select a file from my computer. I was recently working on a little project with Interland. It's like a digital citizenship thing that Google made. And so one of the things that I found was the Interland graphic art. So we've kind of got this like little icon from it. And so I imported that, and the Adobe Color Engine just went through and said, oh, if that's your basis image, let's go ahead and extract a color scheme based off of that. So you can see it grabbed the blue from this corner, the green from right here, the yellow from here, the red from over here, and boom, there's my different color scheme. And then down on the left-hand side, they've got different options. Do you want a colorful scheme? Do you want bright colors? We would recommend that. Do you want it to be more muted? We would recommend those 5. How about deep colors? We would recommend those. So this is a nice way to get an image. Let's say you needed to theme a whole slide deck around Interland. Boom, there are your theme colors for your slide deck. And those are the different colors you can now use for your fonts. There's a lot you can do with color just playing around with these 3 different tools, pulling it out of things that you already have, applying that, turning it into a whole 5-color color scheme. But you've got a lot of color tools at your disposal now to help you make some better presentations. All right, I feel like I just gave you a whole bunch with those color tools. Any questions? Yeah, so I see some smiles, and I see a couple of like overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, I had no idea these tools were out there, and now I'm going to burn hours and hours trying to dial in my color schemes. Any questions that have come up as I was kind of giving you a tutorial on a few of those? No, we're feeling good. Okay, everybody good so far? Great. Let's continue on then. So step number 4, what else can we do to make sure that we're building better presentations? Now that we've kind of dialed in our theme and our fonts and our color scheme, we're ready to actually start building out the content on their slide decks. So the next thing I would encourage you to do is to be mindful of how you're going to place your content onto your slide deck. It's definitely easy to place too much content on here and to get very overwhelming. It's also possible to just pick up something that's very bland, put a couple of pieces of content on there, and then I'm also checked out on this. So what we want to do is we want to think about how we're going to place our content to make sure that we're still engaging the audience. And how can we put this on here strategically so that it's aesthetically pleasing, it's nice, it's inviting, it keeps me curious, but I'm also avoiding cognitive overload for my audience. So I've got a couple of tips for you here. Here are my very practical tips of things that you can do. First, keep it simple. Just a few bullet points per slide. They usually say the golden rule is 3. If you've got more information than 3 pieces, that all goes on the next slide. So like 3 bullet points is kind of good. Look, sometimes that has to be flexed up to 4 or 5, but you want to keep it just a few bullet points, not 10 on a slide. You also want to make sure that nothing is too long. Remember, this shouldn't be your whole presentation. These are just the key points, the highlights. You're then going to elaborate when you start to talk about things. So the information that's up here as the visual aid is going to be nothing too long. You want to make sure that it's all stuff that is easy to process. And the other thing I encourage you to do is think about, what do you want people to remember? That's the stuff that goes on the slide deck, not all of the details, not filling in all the gaps, not like giant long complete sentences. What are the key parts that you want people to remember in your slide deck? That's what's going to go up here. Another thing I want to point out is that white space when you're designing is your friend. If you're not familiar with this term, white space is sometimes also called negative space, and that's the amount of space on the slide that is not occupied by everything. You'll notice over here on this slide right now, it is not shoot, I totally lost the word on this. The 2 sides are not equal with one another. Gosh, what is the word that I'm looking for? Ariel's drawing a blank too. Symmetrical. It's not symmetrical. Okay, so that's the key on this. Your slide doesn't necessarily have to be symmetrical. It just has to be something where your eye can kind of follow it and pay attention to things. So since it's very heavy on the right-hand side, you're able to kind of balance that on the left-hand side. But if I had made kind of the Bitmoji that's there as large as the color block on the right-hand side, it would be a little bit overwhelming. So in order to balance this thing out, I actually shrunk down that face a little bit. All the negative space around it makes it more of a focal point and draws your eye over to it. So when you're starting to place some elements on there, don't feel like everything needs to be as large as possible. It's got to be interesting for the eye to follow around the screen. So you want to make sure that you're using a lot of white space and not overcrowding the content that's on any one of your slides. That white space really helps our eye move around the slide quite a bit. Another thing I like to point out is that variation really helps when you're building a slide. So what should you vary in your slides? Fonts, colors, sizes, spacing, even your slide layouts. Notice I'm going to kind of go back in time. Here's the layout for this slide. There's a layout for this slide, layout for this. You'll notice that it's not the same thing in a row over and over again. They're all part of a theme, but the layout is very different on each one. And that keeps it visually interesting. We've all seen those before where it's got like title at the top, body of text, and then an image on the right. And the next slide is title at the top, couple of bullet points, and image on the right. If you can break it up and start to make your slides feel a little bit different from each other, that really helps quite a bit when you're designing a better presentation. And so this the variation really helps. Notice that on this slide, like the oversized whoa really makes a strong impact for you. And then I can add a whole bunch of additional like narration on top of it. I don't necessarily have to put that all on here. So sometimes just a couple of key words that are oversized and then some subtext underneath that helps quite a bit. Or just some text, like there's a lot of white space in the upper right-hand corner and the bottom left-hand corner. That helps the whoa stand out, and then it also helps the block of text on the bottom right stand out. Notice that one is all right aligned. It also just kind of gives you a little bit of variety and makes it look and feel a little bit different than some of the other slides. But it all still feels cohesive. Nothing in here feels totally random and out of the blue. It's all connected together. So that's placing content. Think about spacing things out. Think about using a lot of variety in there. You want things to feel cohesive, but not so much so that it's predictable. Oh, the next slide's going to look like this because the last 7 slides have all looked like that as well. Notice that as soon as I give you something a little bit different, it pulls you back into the slide deck a bit more. All right, slide number 5, or kind of my 5th tip for you, is to make sure that you're also using engaging media. A lot of us, when we're building notes for class or we're building a slide deck for our students, we put a lot of text on there. And I just want to remind you that pictures, and not just pictures, but also symbols, icons, diagrams, graphs, that can all communicate a great deal of information and is sometimes even more effective than text. So don't shy away from using engaging media. Just as we saw before, try not to have it be so overwhelming and have 8 different things on each slide. What I always recommend is each slide should either have some sort of a graphical element. For this one, it's got the graphical element over here around the 5, or there needs to be some sort of an image or something like that to anchor. And not just a for fun image, but like a purposeful image that helps to move the information forward for us. So one of the first best tips for this is to, as you're doing a presentation, to show us instead of tell us. Rather than describing all of these things, can you find an image that makes an impact for the audience? Remember, we always think about images as being worth 1,000 words. If you can find a powerful image, that might do a lot of the talking for you. So if you find that media, pull it in there and incorporate it. And maybe this helps to break up some of the text too. If you've got a couple of slides, the last couple of slides were text heavy, had a lot of bullet points, break it up with an image that kind of recenters the audience and has us thinking about some other things. So use images, but not like this. Everybody can see I found this beautiful diagram of the water cycle, but my background here is gray. The water cycle has a white background, and now I've got that ugly white box around the water cycle. So not like this. If you want to incorporate that image, that's awesome, but let's try to not have it be that white box. We can definitely do better than that. We're looking for something a little bit more like this. Oh, that's better. How did I do that? How did I make it go away? I will show you my secrets. All right, so what's the secret to no more white boxes in your slide decks? I've got 2 options for you. The first is when you're searching for an image. Let's say you're going to search for water cycle. You could try searching for water cycle PNG. That's the key phrase for this. A PNG is a file type. It stands for Portable Networks Graphics. That part's not important. You don't have to worry about that. What is valuable to know is that PNG images may already have a transparent background. And that's what we're looking for, is we want a water cycle that doesn't have a white background. We want that box around the image itself to have a transparent background. So if you search for water cycle PNG, you might be able to find an image that is already transparent. Sometimes, let me go ahead and try this really quick. Water cycle PNG. So I'm going to go do my image search, and I'm looking for water cycle PNG. Here's one. Does everybody see how behind this image, we've got the little checkerboard in the background? That checkerboard, that white and light gray checkerboard, usually means that that image is going to be transparent. I have to tell you, not always. Sometimes it's fake. Sometimes you download it and it literally has a white and gray checkerboard in the background. That's a PNG fail, and we got to go find another one of those. But if you can look through, you're trying to find ones that have those transparent backgrounds. And if you're seeing that checkerboard, there's a good chance that you're going to get it. Now, here's one over here. This is a water cycle graphic that is labeled as a PNG. You'll see it right over here, but that clearly has a white background. So I want you to know, just because it's PNG doesn't guarantee that it's a transparent background, but there's a good chance that it might have one. So that's the first thing I do, is if I'm looking for like a logo or an icon, I try to add PNG first and see if I can find one that's got a clear, transparent background. If, though, you can't find any and you find the perfect water cycle or the perfect icon, and you wish that it had a transparent background, there is a little secret tool that can help you do this. And the secret tool is a website called remove.bg. So you can either type that into your web browser right now, or you can head to remove. You can click that link. And remove.bg does exactly what it advertises. It's going to remove the background from an image. It's also totally free. It's automatic. It's very simple to use. So let me do a quick little demo here for you. I've got this little button that says upload image. So all I have to do first is find an image that is saved on my computer. Let's go get the camel. Let's try that. Okay. So I'm going to import the camel. Here's the camel. It used to have a white background that said iStock in a lot of places. Notice that it figured out that that white background was the remove portion that I wanted to remove. It pulled it out, and now I have just the camel with a transparent background. Now, it still has the iStock. I still shouldn't have downloaded this one, but I was able to at least remove the background from it. And if it removed more of the background than you really wanted, there's also this little edit button where you can go in here and you can erase or restore part of it. So if it's like, hey, it erased part that I need to bring back, you just bring back restore, and then you can kind of like color back in the portion that you want it to bring back. So that's as simple and easy. And then when you go to download this, it will download that image as a PNG. I'm going to open it up. You can't see it right now. When I open it up, I've got a transparent PNG that I can then incorporate back into my slide deck. So remove.bg is going to give you no more white boxes around those images that you're trying to incorporate into your slide deck. Yeah. Okay. Maybe the second coolest thing that I have to show you today beyond the themes is that remove.bg. All right, here's the next part that I want to talk about. Sometimes I think an image could be your whole entire slide. And I don't know that as teachers, we go to this dramatic effect often enough. So if you want to have a big impact in your class, try having a whole bunch of slides that have some text and some bullet points. And then the next one is just a full screen image. The way that you do this is find the image ahead of time and then insert it as the background into your slide deck. And it will literally take up the whole entire piece. So if I want to talk about the Grand Canyon, man, this is so much more powerful than me having my regular theme that says Grand Canyon up at the top and then like a picture of the Grand Canyon in the middle of the slide. Just make it be the whole entire thing. And then if you have some additional text to add on it, just put it right on top using the same font from the rest of the slide deck. Heck, maybe you're still incorporating some of these like blue and red dots from the theme in there just to keep it consistent. You could do that, but you don't have to keep the theme for every single slide. One of those slides could just be an image, or heck, the whole slide deck maybe is just a series of full screen images, and then you just add little text captions on top of it. Anyway, I want to give you that idea of things to play around with. Now, the next question that I know you're going to have is, okay, that sounds great. Where do I find all these awesome full screen, high resolution pictures that aren't going to be all pixelated and ugly and hideous? And for that, I've got some resources for you. So when I'm looking for an image or an icon or something like that, the places that I like to go first are Unsplash, followed by Pixabay, and then Pexels. All three of these websites are royalty-free websites that have free-to-use images. Now, some of them might say you have to attribute back who the photographer is, and you'll notice on mine, I did that on this last slide. Down here at the bottom, you can see I've got the little attribution for Unspeak down there, or Unsplash down there. But the nice part about going there is it means you're going to be using copyright compliant images that you have permission to use. The photographers that have uploaded their images there have uploaded them to be images that we can use for slide decks and presentations and things like that. That is very different from me just searching in Google for Grand Canyon. Google is just going to find all the pictures of the Grand Canyon on the internet for me. And most of them, I probably do not have permission to use in my slide deck. So I'm going to discourage that practice and instead encourage these practices. Try Unsplash, Pixabay, and Pexels as great places to search for your images, not just photos, by the way, but also all sorts of images and backgrounds and things like that. And the next thing I want to recommend is that instead of doing a Google search, I recommend searching within Google Slides itself. So I'm going to go back over here to this slide deck that I had before. If I go up to Insert and I pull down to Image and I say search the web for an image, and I type in something like Grand Canyon, it will search through the internet and it will find pictures that are already labeled to be reused. So it's going to filter out all the ones that I don't have permission to use in the slide deck, and it's just going to give me the ones that have been licensed for reuse. So when I do it that way, I know that I'm about to use an image that is totally fine. So I always recommend doing your image search within Google Slides to add it in here. I recommend teaching your students about that too, because it teaches them good digital citizenship practices. And I want to show you the common way that a lot of people do it that is not exactly right. So they will go over here to Google and they will search for Grand Canyon. And then they will go to images. And you will notice you get way more images there than the ones that I got here. There are a bunch in that Google search, like the main Google search, that did not show up here. And that's because Google's not giving me this one. That's because this photo is owned by mygrandcanyonpark.com, and I don't have permission to use that one. So just because you can find it online doesn't mean you have permission to use it in your slide deck. Now, if you're using a Google search for this, can you filter down to just the images that are allowed for reuse? Yes, you can. And so that's my last little tip over here. Is if you're looking for images, try to do a custom Google image search. And I'll show you what that custom portion looks like right now. So we're going to go down here. I'm going to go to Tools. And down here in Google search, I can modify the size, the color, the type, the time, and the usage rights. This is what I want to start encouraging all of us to do is if you're going to search Google for images, go to usage rights and change it to Creative Commons licenses. Creative Commons are a certain type of licensing permission that allows people to reuse these images for their own presentations or artwork or projects or things like that. So if you're trying to use media for a slide deck or your students are trying to use media for a project, you want to get Creative Commons licenses. And if you search within Google Slides itself, it will only give you the Creative Commons licensed ones. So now here are all the ones that I could download. You'll see they say licensable on them. These are the ones that I'm able to use and be copyright compliant. And so the last thing I have down there on that slide is a little disclaimer at the bottom. Just because you can find an image online doesn't mean you have permission to use it. We want to make sure that we're looking for copyright compliant images, and these different resources here will give you the copyright compliant stuff. All right, let me pause there for a second. We're getting kind of close here to the end, and let me just find out, are there any questions that anybody has on the images portion? All right, last little tip I have on images is you can also level up your designs by designing your own graphics. And this is easier than you think it is. This is a little graphic that I made that you can see it's customized. It says Mr. Rothy's European History Review Guide. It took me about 2 minutes to make this and download it. I did it earlier today. It's super simple, and you can do stuff like this too. How did I make this thing? Do I have like a background as a graphic artist? I do not. But I discovered this awesome website that is totally free for you to use. It is called Canva. And this is like an amateur graphic designer's dream come true. So if you've heard of like Photoshop and stuff like that before, this gets you all of the good Photoshop stuff that you need without the massive Photoshop learning curve that would be required to be a graphic artist yourself. So whenever you see like our newsletters that we send out that have nice little graphics, or like any of the stickers that we've ever made, and you're like, how'd they make that sticker? It's all in Canva. That's what all of us use to make all of our good looking stuff. So if you're looking to kind of make your own images and graphics and go a little bit further, Canva's the tool for you. This is not a Canva training, so I'm not going to dive into all the details here. We do have trainings on Canva from time to time, though. So if you want to learn more about that, you can sign up for one of those. Canva's totally free to use. They have a free and a paid version. And a little known secret is that their premium stuff is all available for free for teachers and students to use. All you have to do is apply for a Canva for Education account. And so there's a little link there where you can apply for that. You have to prove that you're a teacher. Once you do prove that you're an educator, then it gets you all the premium features in Canva. And you can also have your students using Canva to make their own artwork in class and things like that. And my last tip is to listen to the experts. There are a lot of people that have done a lot of research about how we learn best and how slide decks work as visual aids and how we can give the best kinds of presentations. I've tried to incorporate kind of the Reader's Digest version into this slide deck, but I wanted to leave you with a couple of resources in case you want to do more and read a little bit further. The first one, and I referenced this earlier in the slide deck, is an article from Nagel, who went through, and this is published research on what are the 10 simple rules that everybody could follow to design more effective presentation slides. And so these are the top 10 that they came up with. Only include one idea per slide. Spend only 1 minute talking about each slide. Don't do 5 minutes on one slide when you're giving your live talk. Make use of your heading rather than the heading saying like results and then everything's about results. Like tell what the thesis of the results were as your heading. So make the headings meaningful and make them contain the big idea. Only include essential points. Give credit where credit is due. We talked about citing photos and how we get permission to use things. Use graphics effectively. Design to avoid cognitive overload. We spent a lot of time talking about that today. Design the slide so that a distracted person gets the main takeaway. Iteratively improve your slide design through practice. Every time you make a new slide deck, try to make it better than the previous one that you made. And then finally, design to mitigate the impact of technical disasters. There's a lot of things that we can do, backups, PDF, secondary copies, things like that. I'll also leave you with 3 additional resources for you to explore on your own. One I used as part of the basis for this. It's do your slides pass the glance test. So there's some really nice glance things in there. That's a quick read. And then 2 slightly longer reads are this thing about like TED Talks and how they recommend making slides that communicate your idea. And then the last one is 13 essential slide deck tips, tricks, and features. So definitely things worth taking a look at if you want to dive in a little bit more deeply with all of this. And so I kind of wanted to put a bow on this before we wrap up for today and just say, like, what are the takeaways that I'd love for you to have today? We talked about using themes that come from somewhere else, grabbing somebody else's theme and then remixing that for your purpose. After you get that theme, though, what do you need to do? I would say limit what you say on each slide. Find colors and fonts that are going to work harmoniously on the slides. Consider the layout and the variety of the layout and how you're going to lay things out, and also your use of white space. And then lastly, remember, anytime you have a slide deck, this is a visual medium. So it can't just be plain text on a white background. It's got to be something that also communicates and engages visually. So aesthetics can sometimes be as important as content. Not more than, but sometimes can be as important as the content.